So, by now you have probably seen the latest release of what is widely considered the biggest sci fi franchise of all time, and you have also probably watched about 50 videos on your video hosting website of choice, either ranting about how it's the worst thing since sliced foreskin dropped liberally over a pizza with either pineapple or no pineapple or whatever's worse this week, or people ranting about how it's a marvel of filmmaking bravery, deftly deconstructing the entire concept of a film about a guy with a glowing stick fighting a living dildo inside a giant detached anal bead. So, again, I thought in my competing desires to say something interesting and unique, but also to gain popularity to compensate for a failing social life, that I would share some overall thoughts on Star Wars as a thing. I'll start with the start. George Lucas, the creative, hard-working rebel filmmaker who became a lazy, disinterested chair director who does nothing but get his simpering slaves to animate everything. Everyone loves the original trilogy, of course, but when you really get knuckle deep inside the background of making it, when you look at the original script, the ideas that George had for the characters, and all the budgetary issues that force creative solutions, the fact that different directors took on the films, particularly the second movie, that George Lucas doesn't particularly like, you can't really avoid the conclusion that the only reason those movies became cultural phenomena is because other people took the basic material that Lucas came up with and changed it, moulded it, gently cupped it, and turned the original ideas into something actually good. I would therefore suggest that the person that invented Star Wars doesn't actually understand why Star Wars was good. This is confirmed for me personally and for a lot of people when you take a look at the sexually inadequate man bun fest that is the prequels. This is vitally important, but since literally every single person on Earth has already reviewed every single one of the fungally infected, godless, dripping nostril that makes up every single scene in these films, I will avoid indulging in the delicious carb-heavy diet of hating these films for just now, but perhaps a small overall view will help. If you wanted to truly punish yourself for something serious like having uncomfortable thoughts in the changing room looking at well-hung friends, or being slightly too interested in what your cousin is wearing to a wedding, watch all the original films and then watch the three prequels right afterwards and try and pay attention to what is really happening, read between the lines, and look at the amount of times the same thing seems to happen but with an entirely different context. The Force isn't some magical thing that permeates all life like a spilled vegetable soup of some description, but instead in the prequels it is a weird blood marker that gives you magic powers. Lightsabers are not whimsical knightly weapons to be forged by hand as an initiation into the mystical Jedi Order, but rather a factory ordered stab toy that even mentally challenged children can get their hands on. The gritty realistic feel of the originals is replaced by cartoons and all the actors having to walk around slowly because they're stumbling around on closed sets dressed like Tron characters, reacting to nothing whilst Lucas sits in his mobile command station, sipping on overpriced coffee. Forget that Obi-Wan and Luke wore light grey and brown, airy clothing because they lived in a desert. Now that visual is officially the Jedi uniform for some fucking reason. Yoda isn't the subversive, quote-unquote, great warrior who teaches that the energy of the Force is what makes him and everyone else special rather than physical stature. No. Now he's just another video game reject flipping around like a midget ninja. Other actual reviewers such as Red Letter Media have famously went deep inside this issue, but these films basically have the veneer of Star Wars but none of the heart, none of the interesting characters, just lots of noise, bright lights and vomit flavoured dialogue written by a true sociopath. I wish I could just wish away these movies, but I can't. These movies not only ripped out the character-based heart of Star Wars and replaced it with a clown college of nonsense that resembles Indian traffic safety laws, but they also changed the entire paradigm of Hollywood action sequences away from tense, hard-boiled, short scenes with real stakes and believability, and turned them into painfully long, Clockwork Orange-style torture scenes with seizure-inducing strobe lighting, whilst two or more paper-thin characters endlessly slam against each other like 90s pornography. You know, the type with the close-up of the guy's asshole as he viciously saws away at some poor woman's gammon flaps, that kind. We see the real effect of these movies every time you watch some utter ball cancer like Man of Steel. In my opinion, you can also indirectly blame George Lucas for that fiasco, and I will. So at this point, we currently sit with 6 films, 3 good old ones and 3 terrible newer ones. Given the uniquely Star Warsian concept of naming every single minor character for the purposes of funneling merchandise money directly into George Lucas's eyeballs, you also know that in the prequels you can point out all of the characters who will survive into the later films, so there's zero chance that they will die, and also point out that people like Darth Pointless and Liam Neeson don't appear in the new films, so you know that they will die. This is an extra problem for prequels in general, which also adds to an issue later on. But before getting to the newer films, let's look over some other media. My true love of Star Wars, like most sexy well-hung stunt drivers, came from the video games that it spawned. TIE Fighter was my jam. X-Wing, X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, Rogue Squadron, Super Star Wars Supremacy, Dark Forces, the list of excellent games goes on. I even had a Phantom Menace game on the PC where you could go into the stadium during the pod race section and just massacre alien scum in the crowd, which might not be politically correct since I'm assuming that at least 3 school shootings have taken place in the US since I wrote this note, but it was still fun. This is where the universe of Star Wars actually works. You could relive all the great moments in the films over and over, or see little parts of the films fleshed out and turned into entire games. The backstory was right for this type of exploration, and I do love a story about exploring someone at the back. Of course, the slimy Vaseline-coloured eyelids of nostalgia are partly involved here, as the SNES Star Wars games were super hard and blocky, and TIE Fighter for me mostly involves switching on invincibility and flying a TIE Fighter directly inside a Star Destroyer or a Mon Calamari cruiser and holding down the shoot key for like 5 minutes until it eventually explodes. Those idiot officers could never understand how my kill record did thousands of fighters and half the rebel fucking fleet without having to fire a single proton torpedo. Still, the games have provided many hours of fun across literally decades for plenty of people. Prepare yourself for a million voices crying out in sexually frustrated pain only to be silenced by Disney. There were also a huge line of expanded universe books effectively kicked off by the wonderful Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. It introduced a series of stories following the future adventures of Han, Luke and Leia, years after the defeat of the Empire and their struggles against a blue-skinned alien military genius with an army of hairy midget assassins. That is, assassins who are small in stature, not specifically assassins who only kill little people. The way I've described it makes it sound a lot more anime-esque than it actually is, which is unfortunate because it's actually quite good. Unfortunately, the success of this series led to an absolute avalanche of books of wildly different quality, mining every single possible aspect of Star Wars canon. There was like a dozen or more books about an X-Wing Academy, a series of stories about a clone of Emperor Palpatine, a book where the Rebels and the Imperials team up to fight a super ultra bad alien set like 20 minutes after the Return of the Jedi, because aliens from other galaxies are clearly scum that everybody should hate. The list is endless. I remember one book that had 2 fleets slowly creep towards each other throughout the entire story, which is about as exciting as making your own bed. I'm sure there are tons I didn't even read. Akbar's Adventures, or Luke's son and daughter get into a fight on holiday, Han and Chewie arguing with local officials about ship rental rates, and all sorts of other thinned out, padded nonsense. For me, despite how popular a lot of the books were, this is where Star Wars started to really die. The games are different because they were never meant to be in the story. You were just dicking about with spaceships and laser swords and all the rest of the merchandise options. A lot of the books were, again, absolute clown college. To use red letter media again, specifically this time the intellectual giant that is Rich, the basic truth is that Star Wars appears deep, but really isn't that deep as a universe. It's pretty shallow in relative terms. It's not Star Trek, where endless social and political questions can be asked by various different characters in jumpsuits. Star Wars always effectively circles back to a group of rebels fighting against the evil Empire, and people on the dark side trying to get everybody to join their team for some reason. This is where we come to the new films. They also create a problem right away, because the original movies had an original fairy tale feel which is very strongly built around the good versus evil concept. The good guys are super sweet and nice, and the bad guys are moustache twirly, deliciously evil villains. This makes Rogue One an unusual watch, but right away it's another prequel, so we already know right off the bat mostly who's going to live and who's going to die and how the story's going to turn out. Disney's mission of diversity, for whatever reason, did mean that Donnie Yen got a role in a big Hollywood film, and he is just a perfectly beautiful man, so that's a positive for me. But we did have a lot of good guys with forgettable names, shooting people in the back and being generally slimy and unpleasant. I did find it to be an enjoyable war movie with Star Wars skin about the sacrifices of soldiers on the ground that can be forgotten about in the big picture stuff, which is quite interesting. But as an actual Star Wars movie, I'm not so sure. The lead character is massively uninteresting. Her and the rest of her gang don't seem to have specific, not plot related views or feelings or drives, really, and the good guys are barely any nicer than the bad guys. That's not really Star Wars to me. Basically, it was a fun but pointless endeavour. Narratively, that film fills in an already filled in space before the first movie. So then you head on to Force Awakens. This was a competent movie, a lot more like the Star Wars vibe that people expect, obvious good guys and bad guys for the most part, unlike recent certain abominations. They remembered that the old characters are why the franchise has value and made them important. I think even though they followed the constant problem of basically rejigging the original trilogy plot points, they made a film that made people feel like Star Wars was watchable again, washed off the sweaty old man locker room stink of the prequels, and introduced new characters with mixed results. Finn was quite an interesting concept to me. Someone who has to develop bravery over his arc because he is consumed by fear and runs away from the First Order to join the Resistance. That's quite good. Poe, the dashingly good-looking, possibly gay or bi, ethnically not quite sure fighter pilot guy, didn't have much to do until the next film, and what interesting choices they made from there, but he was good to have around. And then Rey, the lead character, people get pissy when she gets called a Mary Sue, but come on, she is. An hour or so into the film, she has to be told that the Jedi are actually real, and that she is actually in the Millennium Falcon, and yet across what must only be a few days in story terms, like in the actual world, she defeats several people with a stick, performs incredible zero-G style pilot manoeuvres in atmosphere in a ship that she states she's never flown before, takes literally one practice shot before being able to crack stormtroopers from 30 metres away with a blaster, resists a Jedi mind probe, uses the Jedi mind trick on a stormtrooper, circumvents Finn's rescue plan by effectively rescuing herself, and then defeats a Dark Jedi who's been trained by Luke Skywalker and Snoke in a lightsaber duel all in one movie. Come on, man. People forget that fans like Luke Skywalker because he struggled and suffered, and he had motivation, and then slowly developed and gained more skills over the course of the trilogy. Training to be a Jedi is literally the entire basis of most of the previous 6 mainline movies that released before this one. In The Last Jedi, not only does Rey beat Luke fucking Skywalker in a fight, but she can even swim despite living alone on a desert planet. You know, it's not anti-women to point this stuff out. People want to see great female characters, including me, and strong heroes, but a strong hero is not an unstoppable hero. Rey is reasonably likeable, but she needs to be given an actual purpose and a plot and driving motivation other than marketing device for female fanbase. I think Daisy Ridley makes the character a bit more likeable than the actual writing does. Without wishing to tread over ground that many better video reviewers than I have done, Force Awakens was probably as good as it could have been, despite the repetitive elements. It was a soft reboot in all but name that allowed Harrison Ford to finally get his death scene, and it created some fascinating questions for future films to answer, which of course they chose not to answer in the most confusing and divisive thing since every election ever, The Last Jedi. What did Luke think about Rey's weird 20-minute pose with his lightsaber? Nothing. Who is Snoke? He ain't shit. Just some idiot in weird pyjamas who went out like a punk ass bitch. Who are Rey's parents? Literally nothing. She is so pure and perfect, she literally coalesced as a unique collection of force molecules or some shit. How will Finn feel after nearly being killed by Captain Comedown? Doesn't matter, he'll just dress up like a weird Japanese sex toy, stumble about a ship and then go on a prequel level adventure with some new character. In all seriousness, I'm not going to review the film to death, but like I imagine most people, I enjoyed some parts and disliked other parts. For one, it turns out that Luke has the same fate of literally every good Jedi, i.e. they become depressed old hermits living in squalor. The dark side always look like they're having fun at least, like Snoke in his crazy Persian sex robes. I did thoroughly enjoy the idea of Kylo tempting Rey with giving her some kind of direction and purpose, and the whole there are different perspectives to the story thing, which was really quite clever. Even though in the end it ended up still heading to the Return of the Jedi confrontation, even to the point of having weird red guard people and seeing a space battle outside the window. Seeing some of the original characters interact finally was good, although again, Rey translates for Chewie and not Luke, who has known Chewie for decades, but to be fair to her glorious majesty, I felt Rey was actually a lot more interesting in this movie. She felt some pain as she dealt with a challenge of personality, something she couldn't just swipe aside. I also liked Finn's arc. He has grown from the weedy, scared coward fleeing the First Order to finally and eventually trying to make the ultimate sacrifice of heroism to defend his friends despite his own fear. I really liked that growth. And then of course they fucking ruined it with that clown bullshit right at the end. I like seeing Leia get some good screen time. She actually seemed relevant and interesting, even with the weird magical Magneto hand power scene. Poe's stuff, on the other hand, was complete cherry balls. It's bad enough that they shoehorned in a section with weird submarine Pez dispenser ships to blow up a cartoonishly big enemy ship after his thrilling heroics, and he gets dressed down for it, but then they create, to paraphrase a controversial YouTuber, Admiral Gender Studies, to pretend to be a bad guy but secretly be a good guy. Also, Poe can learn to not be a dashing, cool, hotshot hero, even though his perspective was correct. The man who saved the Resistance twice only wanted to know what the plan is, but Captain Tumbler, on the other hand, her story was wrong. So wrong. Her plan was to secretly not tell anyone that they were flying in a straight line, whilst their entire fleet gets whittled down to nothing, and then trying to sneak away in ships towards a planet as if neither of those things could be seen from a fucking window. She couldn't just tell everyone that at the beginning. And they killed Admiral fucking Akbar in a cameo, just so this nonsense character could exist. And then her heroic rescue move, after nearly every single member of the Resistance is dead, is to fly her ship directly into the enemy ships. Why not do that at the beginning? Or why not ask an R2 unit to do it for you? Why aren't you doing this all the time instead of flying big slow motion plus symbols towards huge enemy ships? Idiot. They went full circle on the plot. When Battlestar Galactica first came out, it was accused of copying Star Wars, and now here we are. This movie's plot is literally the premise of the miniseries Reboot, and Reboot is exactly what's happened here despite all the original dressing. They even went back to saying Rebels towards the end of this movie, and of course, Luke dies in a strange and confusing manner, and sadly the only remaining original star of the main trio will have to die off screen because Carrie Fisher died in real life. How awkward and unpleasant. There are a couple of longer term issues with the resolution of this film that I'm interested to see how they get resolved. For one, this has the feel of a J.J. Abrams Star Trek film where previously established in-universe concepts and rules don't really matter as much as they used to. As people have pointed out, for instance, why don't all Jedi just beam images of themselves everywhere rather than go the places themselves? Or why don't all rebels just rig up large lumps of metal to hyperspace drives and launch them at First Order ships? The way things have been left means Kylo Ren is the big bad and Rey must defeat him. But Kylo couldn't beat her in a fight despite his advantages. He couldn't control her mind because she was stronger. He couldn't win her over emotionally or reason with her logically with his words because she refused in all cases. Even when they teamed up to fight, she still helped him because he was inferior and needed her help. So where does the tension come from in the inevitable conflict in the third movie? Plus, given this new alliance basically amounts to 20 or so people, We don't know the scope of the conflict. Is the entire Republic gone, or just the administrative centre? We've seen the First Order lose effectively a new Death Star, their Supreme Leader, the big triangle dreadnought thing, as well as Snoke's ship and pretty much most of his fleet across the 2 movies so far. So who is fighting whom? How many people are on either side? What are the stakes? What are they actually fighting over? This is supposed to be a trilogy, remember? The Emperor was killed at the end of the 3rd movie as part of Vader's redemptive arc. Snoke was killed near the middle of the 2nd movie of this trilogy. If you like or dislike the Marvel movies as you choose, you must admit that they have a long-term plan and everything tends to fit together, and it becomes more impressive over time as you look at the overall work, that things that happen in one movie are relevant maybe 3 movies later. These Star Wars films have the vibe of each group of people doing their own kind of thing for each film, which hinders future writers and directors. Time will tell on this one. Basically, this movie is a microcosm of the entire franchise. It was good sometimes, bad in other times. Some people love it, some people hate it. Wildly inconsistent overall. However, when this embarrassing Han Solo film comes out, mining even more background exposition and scraping it together into a sludgy, bad smelling film, we will have had 5 prequel movies with probably more to come. That's as many prequel movies in the canon as we do actual main movies. That's just ridiculous. But anyway, before you get too bored, or if you skipped all of this lumpy soup, then the question at the beginning remains, is Star Wars actually any good? And the answer is yes, but Star Trek is better. I squeeze the gas, my clips is empty. My clips is empty.